Hello and welcome to the Swine Disease Reporting System. This is the report number 34, which covers the information regarding November 2020. My name is Edson Magalhães here at Iowa State University.
Hello, my name is Giovanni Trevisan here at Iowa State.
And my name is Daniel Linhares here at Iowa State.
And today we're going to cover 3 different pages, which is the PRRS detection, PCR detection of PRRS, Mycoplasma, enteric coronavirus, and also disease diagnosis. We're going to cover the results from November 2020. And today we have the pleasure to have here as a special guest Dr. Clayton Johnson. Dr. Clayton Johnson is a veterinarian partner at Carthage Veterinary Service, located in Carthage, Illinois. And he attended the University of Illinois College of Veterinary Medicine, receiving his DVM there. So Dr. Johnson is a global expert in swine health and production, having work experience in Latin America, Europe, and China. And recently, Dr. Johnson received the Lehman Swine in Practice Award. And the Swine Disease Reporting System is really happy to have you here today, Dr. Johnson. It's a pleasure for us. And as Daniel and Giovanni mentioned before, if we have the podcast today here, that this recording is because of you, one of your ideas, so we really appreciate that.
Oh, thank you very much, Edison. It's my honor to be here. I really appreciate the opportunity to be involved. Thank you to Giovanni and to Daniel, really to your whole team there at Iowa State for all the work you do with the SDRS, but all the work you do in general to support the industry. It's very much appreciated.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks for the support.
So let's get started. So just an overall question. How have programs like the SDRS helped veterinarians as you in field to make decisions regarding disease management or disease control? Give us some examples regarding the decisions that you typically do based on this kind of information.
Yeah, Edison, I think when I think about SDRS and similar disease reporting mechanisms, number one, they serve as some sort of a frame of reference for me to understand is what I'm seeing in the field as a practicing veterinarian, is it unique? Mm-hmm. Is it in line with what my neighbors are seeing, with what other veterinarians are seeing across health statuses and geographies? Or am I seeing something that is unique, but it's unique to me? It's not a disease syndrome that others are seeing, or it's not a lack of a disease that others are seeing. So to me, it brings perspective. It brings the perspective of my current situation and how much of an outlier am I relative to my peers in the industry. I think the other thing that it helps me with is disease management. This report drills into the nitty-gritty details of diagnostic results from specific pathogens. And that helps me to understand what are the changing diagnostic results throughout the industry. Now, it would be dangerous for me to just take all of that as fact and say, okay, the report says that 25% of the samples this week are positive for PRRS. So that means 25% of the pigs are positive for PRRS. That's not what we want to mine the report for, right? We're not necessarily looking for pure answers. We're looking for questions, okay? Mm-hmm. We're looking to say, is there a change in the PRRS prevalence out there based on these PCR results? And as such, should I change my disease management practices to go along with it? Are we seeing less PRRS activity, and I should be pushing more towards elimination of PRRS virus altogether? Or are we seeing more PRRS activity, and I should be more in PRRS control mode and more recommending that we build immunity and maintain immunity through vaccination? I think the same thing with influenza virus as we think about our autogenous vaccine options and trying to customize autogenous vaccines to regional specific health challenges. Mm-hmm. The more information that I can get in terms of what specific pathogen are we finding on diagnostics, and then within that, for like say an influenza, can I dive in a little bit deeper and look at maybe clades and clusters and subtypes and really hone in on what families of virus may be present in my world? That helps me to be a better veterinarian simply because I'm recommending control programs that are more optimized to the environment that we're placing our pigs in. So again, I don't see the reports as being a direct answer for that, right? I don't open these reports saying, how many pigs should I vaccinate for PRRS today? I open these reports looking to say, what's changing and what can that spur discussion, whether that's just communication with you guys that put together the reports to better understand the details of what got submitted, or maybe just calling up other veterinarians and saying, hey, here's my interpretation of the report. Does that match what you guys are seeing in the field? But I think if it's facilitating the discussions in the right direction about what pathogens are changing, where are they changing, and why are they changing, that's the big value proposition of these reports.
Yeah, really interesting. Thanks for your thoughts on that. The data is being generated, so using that data, like using it on this application that you mentioned, this is the value, right?
Yeah.
Any additional comment, guys? So let's move for the first page, which is the PRRS page in the report, which covers the PCR detection of PRRS. And Giovanni has put together here some algorithms to identify some trends. And we observed that for this specific time of the year, we expected the predicted model that Giovanni built predicted an increase in PRRS detection. So Giovanni, what are the highlights for the PRRS page this month?
Hi, Edson. As you mentioned, PRRS virus detection was in the upper boundaries of the forecast model at the end of October and the beginning of November, and that was mostly contributed by increased detection in the age category wean-to-market animals. During November, a moderate increase in PRRS virus detection was observed in adult sow farms. And when you look at the regional level, this PRRS detection was above state-specific baselines at Minnesota, South Dakota, Iowa, Nebraska, Missouri, and Indiana. The advisory group did point out that this increase in detection in wean-to-market animals put pressure on sow farms, leading to lateral breaks in sow farms and also in finishing sites. Associated factors with this increased PRRS virus detection include cold weather favoring the spread of the virus, by vaccination and loadout crews, transport, and the other indirect roads.
So just a quick question here for you, Clayton. I'm looking at the charts here as Giovanni was describing them, and it's pretty clear here in the plots as well as in the minds of practitioners like yourself that at this time of the year, PRRS detection really goes up relative to summer when it goes down, right? And this positivity rate is really associated with incidence and virus activity in the field, right? So again, it goes up in this winter, goes down in summer, up in winter, down summer. So we know that wave is coming. So how can we beat that odds, Clayton? What else can we do as a swine industry? We know it's coming, and it's coming again. What can we do this year or next year to beat that odds and keep that pressure of infection down or in the lower boundaries?
Yeah. You know, Daniel, everybody struggles with PRRS. If you're really lucky, you're in a situation where maybe once in the lifetime of your farm, you experience a PRRS outbreak, once every 20 years or maybe once every 30 years. But those are the extremely lucky people. The reality is for most commercial pig producers, sow producers in the U.S., you're probably looking at a 1 out of every 10-year break rate or better. So it is a challenge for producers. We also, I think, have to recognize that it's an expensive problem for producers not only to have, but an expensive one for producers to fix. When we think about the winter transmission, fall, spring transmission, we think about aerosol transmission of the virus. We think about weather patterns, environmental conditions that are conducive to the aerosol transmission. And those weather patterns are very unique. I mean, that's something I always try and point out to producers is, hey, we come into this barn every day, sometimes multiple times a day, 365 days a year. That risk of us coming in and the equipment and supplies we bring in from a biosecurity perspective, that risk is always there. Aerosol is kind of an easy boogeyman to blame on a PRRS outbreak. But the reality is the conditions that are appropriate for aerosol transmission don't happen terribly often. Now, out of 24 hours a day and 68 minutes in an hour and 365 days, they happen, and they happen this time of year. We can mitigate a good amount of that risk with air filtration. I think everybody's very comfortable with that technology. The challenge with it is the cost of filtering your farm, particularly for a retrofit farm that's negative pressure, is very expensive. And for some producers, especially coming out of the last 2 or 3 years where profitability for producers has really been at poor levels, that's just too much of an investment for them to be able to make. It may not be the long-term investment value proposition. If you break once every 10 years, maybe filtration isn't worth it. Save your money, that you would have spent on filtration, and just understand that you're going to have an outbreak every once in a while. Sometimes it could be for a short-term value proposition. Maybe the producer says, yeah, I want to filter, but I haven't made any money the last 2 or 3 years, so I just don't have the cash. I don't have the ability to invest in that. So the cost of those improvements can be pretty substantial. Mm-hmm. I think the other piece of perspective that I would offer up is if we look at where our PRRS outbreak rates have been in the last 5 years, they've moved in a positive direction. We've really come a good way from, some of the early 2010s. I think 2011, 2012 was a bad year. Maybe 12, 13, right before PED, if I remember right, was also a pretty challenging year. But we've come as an industry from where we were kind of north of 30% on the MSHIP report pretty consistently, now down to where we're more in that 25% range. And I think we have to look at that as some sign of progress, that some of the things that we are doing are valuable. We're certainly picking the low-hanging fruit early on. So my guess is the 5 to 8% improvement per year that we've made has been some of the easiest improvements there were to make out there. And as is always the case, as we try to take that number low, it's going to be more costly to do so and more difficult to do so. I think we have to continue to do it, to push for it as veterinarians, but also work within the economic constraints that are always present in our industry and move at the pace that producers are capable of moving at.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you mentioned a good point, and that's, I think, fair to say, right, that we complain about PRRS as we should, because it still bleeds or at least adds in terms of cost of production. But one positive thing is that if you look at the economic impact studies, right, have demonstrated, I'm thinking specifically about the Daryl Holt-Kemp's study. I think was that 2011 or 13, where he described that the cost to the industry was 664 million or something, right? And more recently, last year or a couple of years ago, he demonstrated a 20% decrease of that on that. So it's not that we're losing the battle; it's still some ground to cover, but the industry is picking up, right?
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that we're managing it better than we ever have before. Is it perfect? No, but in healthcare, we typically don't get to perfect. We're focused on progress and trying to get better every year. I think that'll get harder in future years, but we also should expect that technology is not going to be stagnant, that we'll have improvements in technology. The next new innovation like air filtration or the lowering of cost of the existing air filtration technologies. Those things are going to happen, and we should take advantage of them every year.
And you talked a lot, as it makes a lot of sense to talk about biosecurity. How about herd immunity or immunologic solutions? Thinking about there's different ways to do that, right? So, what's the role on that, or potential for that of those technologies on reducing or beating that odds and keeping incidence low next year?
Yeah, I am really bullish on our ability to better manage immunity long term. I think one of the benefits that is going to come out of 2020 is a significant investment in vaccination technologies and therapeutics related to treating viral infections. And obviously, a lot of that will be driven by the human side. But as is always the case, we will be able to cherry pick some of those technologies that look interesting and look like they could help in the swine industry. And we'll be able to leverage the huge investment that the world's making in COVID management right now. I think that'll help us in terms of new vaccine technologies. I think that'll help us in terms of immunomodulators that we can perhaps administer to the pig concurrently with vaccination and or concurrently in the face of an outbreak to try and optimize the immune response. Some of those immunomodulators are going to upregulate certain things. Some of them are going to downregulate some of the bad inflammation that really causes the pig to feel bad. And I'm really excited about that. I think short-term, Daniel, you look at the new vaccines from a PRRS perspective that have come to the market, and it tells you that people are interested in the space, they're investing in the space, whether it's new versions of modified live vaccines or new versions of killed vaccines. I know there are lots of folks working in the area trying to come up with solutions. They understand that we're far from a perfect state when it comes to PRRS management, and they continue to apply R&D dollars towards PRRS management. So I think there's some really neat things that are going to come down the pipeline. Long term, probably piggybacking off our COVID learnings. Short term, there are things that are coming at us every day, right? There are new immunomodulators, new PRRS vaccines that are coming out. I shouldn't say every day, but every year for sure. And really, to me, the focus in the next couple of years is to figure out how do we stack those technologies, right? Mm-hmm. What are the pieces of technology that are synergistic with each other that they can be leveraged together, and 1 + 1 doesn't equal 2. 1 + 1 from an investment standpoint equals 4 because you double the return on each of those individual products that you're using.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Very good.
Thanks, Clayton. So moving up to the PED page. So this page covers actually the PCR detection for enteric coronavirus, for PED, deltacoronavirus, and TGE. Giovanni, what are the highlights for this month report regarding the enteric coronavirus detection?
There was no detection of TGE since August. The levels of detection of PED and deltacoronavirus during November was similar to October. Even though these levels of detection are lower for this period of the year, the advisory group did point out that this lower detection should be taken as highlights for the swine industry that should be keep vigilant on these agents. Compliance with cleaning and disinfection procedures at a farm and transportation level, routes of transport, people and animal movements, feed supply chain security, close monitoring finishing sites, and having a contingency plan to avoid additional farm contaminations can contain the further spread of these agents and should be considered.
Yeah, thanks, Giovanni. So, Clayton, since the enteric coronavirus introduction, what are the most important lessons, on your opinion, that we learned to deal with this pathogen since its introduction in 2013? What will be, in your opinion, the most up-to-date advices for controlling and manage this pathogen?
So many learnings that came out of that, Edison. It's one of those events that kind of like 9/11, if you're in the pig industry, you know exactly where you were when you first heard of PED, right? I can think to the exact location I was, who I was with, and then the immediate fear of, oh no, I'm responsible for the healthcare of a large number of pigs throughout the United States, and I don't even know what this disease is, much less how to manage it and how to prevent, my client from getting it. I think one of the big learnings that's come out of it is certainly the different routes of introduction in which a pathogen can come into your pig farm, with certainly feed and feed ingredients being at the top of that list, was something that really wasn't on our radar very much before the coronavirus introductions. But it's certainly on our radar right now. And as we think about African swine fever and some of the other pathogens that aren't in the country and we want to keep them out, there's certainly some of the higher risk things that we look at in terms of what could result in the index case of ASF here in the United States. And even if you argue, well, we don't think that all the transmission works that way for the enteric coronaviruses, well, sure, agreed. There are plenty of good ways to move PED and deltacoronavirus around that aren't feed related, but it just takes one index case to create a bunch of cases in the industry and overwhelm the industry. And I think that would be lesson number 2. And it's been reinforced throughout 2020 with the various challenges we've had, is that we, at the end of the day, are a relatively fragile supply chain. There's not a lot of redundancy built into each step along the way because redundancy typically adds costs. And the United States pig industry has done a great job of making the lowest cost pork in the world. But that has come, as I say, at a loss of redundancy. And you look at some of the challenges that we have with being able to mitigate a large-scale disease outbreak like PED. We certainly showed that we can do it with time. But, the timeline of 12 to 18 months that it took us to get the disease under control here in the United States is probably unacceptable as we look forward to a foreign animal disease outbreak. We don't have 12 to 18 months to wait to get ASF under control. If we don't get that under control in 12 to 18 days, we're in a situation where you see some of the Asian countries that have been hit relatively recently where they're looking at being ASF endemic. And that's obviously a situation that we can't live with. So I think understanding that our industry can be fragile, while we think of it as a very vibrant and robust industry that gives lots of people jobs and is wonderful in many ways for our economy and country in general, we have to understand that there are risks to it and that one pathogen can cause a tremendous amount of damage in a short amount of time if we're not prepared for it.
Yeah, no, really great comments. Thanks. So moving to the next page, which is concerns the Mycoplasma detection, PCR detection for Mycoplasma. What are the highlights for this month report, Giovanni?
Well, as expected, Mycoplasma hyopneumoniae is having a decreased detection for this time of the year. So no other comments.
Okay, so let's move to the final page, which is the page that covers disease diagnosis detection by the Iowa State VDL. In this month, we observed an increased number of diagnoses for some specific pathogens. What are the highlights regarding the disease diagnosis, Giovanni?
From the disease diagnosis, we need to remind that we are in the time of the year where we usually see some increase in the number of diagnoses, especially for respiratory agents. With that said, we see some signals for increased detection for influenza A, PRRS, Streptococcus suis, rotavirus, Pasteurella multocida in the past 6 weeks.
Mm-hmm. Clayton, how have you been dealing with these pathogens and their interactions in the field? And what will be, in your opinion, the optimal disease management protocol for dealing with these pathogens in high density or challenge areas?
Yeah. Well, I think, some of it Giovanni mentioned, going back to his comments on Mycoplasma. We expect some of these disease incidence levels to spike this time of year. So in some ways, as a veterinarian, we just need to be able to make the prognosis and the prediction for our producers. Hey, these things are going to happen. We need to be prepared for them. For some diseases like PRRS and influenza, producers may be on a seasonal vaccination program where they're looking to booster immunity, at least at the sow herd level, in the fall, trying to prepare for the inevitable disease transmission. For some of the other diseases you mentioned, I do think they're kind of year-round challenges. Strep suis would be a great example. Some of that strep suis activity could be driven by an increase in PRRS infections at sow farms. Strep is a common secondary pathogen to a PRRS infection in a pig immediately post-weaning. So that could be driving some of it. But I would tell you strep is a real troubling pathogen for me, and it's one that we're not necessarily getting better at with time. It seems like we're kind of in a rut of trying to do a better job of managing those strep bugs. There's a lot of effort that's being put into diagnostic evaluation and understanding how diagnostics can better help identify highly likely, to be virulent isolates, help to kind of follow the chain or the family tree, if you will, of the strep isolate and understand, this specific strep isolate in your sow herd, where did it come from? And, how does your multiplication source, your guilt source play into that source of strep? To me, the strep is going to continue to be one that we battle because I think it's probably increased right now just due to the PRRS activity. But it's one for me I would highlight that over the last few years has increased in terms of its severity and overall negative impact on pork production.
Well, very, very good. That brings us to our closing question, which how do you envision, Clayton, the future of disease diagnostic and surveillance?
I certainly envision a situation where we are doing more active surveillance within our pig populations. As the cost of diagnostic testing goes down, I think you'll see producers make more investment in trying to categorize disease based on these active diagnostic samples. And PRRS management is the best example of that, Daniel and guys. With PRRS, until we had a classification system, it was really hard to have any sort of consistent management processes to try and drive people towards a goal, to try and show them, here's how you can get out of stage 1 and into stage 2. And diagnostics are at the core of the decision to move the herd or the animal from stage 1 to stage 2. And those diagnostics are routinely collected. They're not biased towards sick pigs. They're the population-based samples that you guys know and work with so much. Processing fluids, oral fluids, all those things that we're doing now to evaluate population disease dynamics. I think we need to take that and push that forward. There was a team that worked on a proposal for Mycoplasma categorization. I think that's a very good idea and something the industry needs to run with. I think we need to look at circovirus in the same way. Can we categorize PCV2, PCV3, the next PCV that comes at us? I think each of these pathogens that are endemic pathogens within our pig flows, so ones in which we know because of vertical transmission from the sow to the pig, all the pigs in the chain are going to be infected. PCV certainly fits that category. Strep is another one that fits that category. We need better diagnostic decisions in terms of how to spend our money so that we do a better job of categorizing the disease status within that flow of pigs. And then we can put very specific interventions in place associated with each step in that categorization. Mm-hmm. That helps us to measure the response to those interventions, right? Mm-hmm. And we've talked about this a lot with PRRS in terms of our pump project and trying to, understand what are you doing for PRRS management and ultimately how does that influence your outcomes? If we've got enough people that are trying consistently intervention strategies, we can evaluate those and compare them to different intervention strategies over time. But at the core of that is a consistent set of diagnostics. So when I say I achieved stage 2, it means the same thing as Giovanni saying he got to stage 2 and Edison saying he got to stage 2. That's the apples to apples piece that the diagnostics can bring us if we use the diagnostics in a coordinated and consistent way.
Systematic.
That's right.
Wow. Thank you. You left us with a lot to think about. And thank you for that. Lots of good comments, perspectives, and we will have that as a homework, right? To kind of think about it, and hopefully the audience is going to do the same. So,
yeah. And it's exciting. There's a lot of stuff to know, to learn about it. Yeah? A lot of data that it's coming, and a lot of stuff that we have to learn. So, getting to the conclusion, would like to thank you, Dr. Clayton Johnson, for joining us today. It's a pleasure to have you here to share the knowledge that you have with us. And like I said before, thanks for the ideas, and the podcast is one of your ideas, and all for all the support that you have been providing as an advisory member at the Swine Disease Reporting System. And with that, we would like to thank you again, and I see you guys next month. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Turn it on soft and low.